This episode of the Get Fast podcast is brought to you, as it has been all year, by TriVelo's Coaching, where we help triathletes and cyclists like you train smarter to race faster. You are joined, as always, by your host, former Australian Ironman Champion, Gerard Donnelly, and I am Jordan Donnelly. And in today's episode, we are reflecting on the year. It's one of my favourite episodes to do. We did it last year. I personally find so much value in reflecting on the year because you think back to what's happened, and so much happens in 12 months of it. Everyone always says when it gets to Christmas time that the year has flown, but when you take the time to actually reflect and look back on what you've achieved, what you haven't achieved, what you've done, you really find a lot of value. And whenever we sit down and do this, we write a list of 12 things, but often we come up with 30. And that's why I really like this episode. So we'll get into it pretty quickly because there's a lot to get through, and it's one of my favorite conversations to have. And I would encourage a lot of people to do this in their personal life as well. I do it every year. I've been doing it for a while, pretty much since I was an adult, and I just find a lot of value in reflecting on the year, and it helps you set up the next year really well. So we'll get into point number one of our 12 lessons of Christmas, the 12 lessons of 2020 from a TriVelo's point of view. And we promise we'll only talk about COVID once because everyone's had enough of that. But number one, and one of the biggest themes of this year was we spent a lot of the year looking at nutrition, and we learned a lot more about nutrition. We had Dr. Harry Weisinger on the podcast, and we've just looked into it a lot personally as well. And nutrition has always been important, but I think this year we really found extra importance in it, and it came up for a lot of athletes as well. So let's talk about taking control of your nutrition.
Yeah, it's really good to reflect on the year, and it's great to get to the end of the year. And a lot of people's mindset, before we start talking about Harry, a lot of people's mindset, I've been quite intrigued throughout the year because it's been one of those years like no other. There's so many negative things in the world that have happened, and because of that, I really believe, from my point of view, my perspective, there's so many positive things have come out of these negative things. And we've said many times over the journey, for every negative thing, there is always a positive. And if you've just got to find it. And the hard part is identifying it, because you feel so crap when something bad happens to you. And the examples are enormous. You could lose your job. That's pretty hard thing to face. You could get a better job. And what a turnaround from such a disappointment. That's just one example. You could be really struggling with fitness and health, and all of a sudden you've got more time this year, and people's health has, there's a huge amount of examples of people who've lost weight and have become a better human being, health-wise. There's also examples of people who've gone the other way. Mm-hmm. But they're just examples of, the way you think about, the way you frame the year and reflect on it, and then try to do something about it for the next period of time, whether it's another year or 6 months or 3 months, whatever your targets are. I just think this is such an important thing to do, exactly what you're talking about. And if you don't do that, you're not really being accountable to yourself. I think you're actually avoiding facing up to good and bad things. And as we've said many times, you learn more from crap things that happen to you than all the good things. Every lesson that I've ever learned in sport has been from a disappointment. So I think this is kind of what we're trying to frame the mindset of. Well, what did we learn this year? What are the key things that stick out in our minds that we can actually use going forward?
It's a classic, isn't it? That it's just the irony is so extreme that you can't learn or grow unless you've experienced a failure or mistake. It's how training works. It's how your body responds to training. You can't get better at training. You can't grow your fitness without your body going through pain and suffering in training. It's the same with every area. You can't grow and learn unless you make a mistake. And the irony of that is just so funny to me.
Yeah, and you look at all the very successful businessmen in the world, a fair percentage of them have been bankrupt, and yet they've come back and learnt from how they stuffed up that and made it a better version. And, I'm not suggesting that that's the extreme case, but from what we're trying to do to our listeners is get them to understand that it might feel like it's bad at the time, but if you frame it correctly, you can actually learn from it and grow as a person and become a better human, and not just in your physical performances, but everyday life. If you carry the same philosophies that you do in your training into your life, you'll actually find that you'll succeed as well as you do in, and most people that have come across our table have improved through the journey. And we've had some people who've said, I just want a program. I don't really mind if I improve. And I just find that attitude quite almost shocking to me, because I just feel like you want to be a person who's going to grow as much as possible. And I'll say to them, well, I can give you a program, but you will actually, without even trying, you will improve just by being consistent and having structure and not doing anything else, just doing that. And you don't even have to train hard. But if you have some structure and some consistency, you will progress.
Just the theme of kind of what we're talking about with growth and challenge, and reminds me of one of my favourite quotes of all time, and it's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times.
Wow.
It just circles around, and it's just kind of the nature of how you go through things. When you're struggling, you learn a lot and you really grow and you become stronger for it, and then you actually have a good time, and then because you're having a good time, you kind of relax and ease off the pedal, and then you're in trouble again, and then it's that cycle. It's
fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of the theme of what we're going to talk about today, I guess. So
sorry to digress off the first point.
Yeah.
But I just think that that's important, and no matter what you hear in the next 12 Christmas goals or things we've learnt, the main thing that we're trying to get across is, we should be all helping each other in society, and that's why we love what we're doing, because we are seeing progress in people in their journey as athletes, and you can put that into other aspects of your life. So let's fire away with this. So
yeah. So we were going to launch straight into nutrition and taking control of your nutrition, and one of the main points was you got to be accountable for what you eat.
Yeah, it's your decision. Funnily enough, no one spoon feeds you after you're 2 or 1.5. Someone's controlling everything you're doing up until that point, and it's only 1 year out of possibly 90. The rest of the time, you're in control of what you put on your fork and put in your mouth. You're in control of when you open the pantry door, what you want to do. You're in control of when you open the fridge, what you want to eat. You're in control of what you do at the supermarket. So there's no excuse. You are making the decisions about what you eat, and you are what you eat. And if you look in the mirror and you're not happy with that, then you have the opportunity to change that. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learnt this year, and it's actually 2 years for me since I've been on this journey, through the help of Dr. Harry, is to understand that it's every decision you make has a consequence with food, and it's the same in everything in life. But the evidence in food is always there, isn't it? You grow bigger as a person in a shape that you don't like, or you remain the shape that you do like, and you're deciding what food and the amount of food that you consume.
It's an interesting topic because the topic of weight has become taboo to a point where you aren't allowed to comment on people's weight, and for a reason. You don't want to shame people for their weight. We don't want to ever be in a position where people are getting put down or feel negative about themselves for what they're eating. That's not what we're trying to do on the podcast at all, and it's a little bit of a hard position for us to be in because we're talking on a public forum, and we want to talk about this in a non-judgmental way. But I was really impressed when Harry came on the podcast and put it in a way that isn't judgmental, it's just kind of factual. And he just said, we are a gluttonous society, and we've been set up just to be addicted to food pretty much. And it's just the way that things are now. Food companies are just trying to get you to consume more, and that's just the way it is. And it's actually made society, put society in not a very good position. And we all fall trapped to it, and we all fall victim to it. And you have to really be aware of that to try and change it and to try and stop it. And I had an interesting experience a couple of weeks ago talking to a friend, and he's training really hard and training really well, and he's leaned up a lot, and he's had a lot of comments about how lean he is. And you kind of start saying, hey, I don't comment on your weight. Don't comment on my weight. And it's unacceptable to comment on someone that's overweight, but it's acceptable for people to talk about how skinny or lean you are. And I think that as a society, we just need to be not afraid of talking about the facts. And, we're not, you don't ever, like I said, want to be putting people down, but let's talk about what you were just saying before. Who's responsible for your accountability? And let's try and approach it in a way that can help. And
not judgmental.
Yeah.
And that's the key. The difference is we're quick to judge everybody. We form opinions on what we see. And if we see an obese person, then we form an opinion straight away that they don't care. And we have no idea about anything to do with their history, their medical, anything to do with what's happened in their life, yet we judge them. And the same with someone who's the complete opposite, who's not eating healthy and they're too lean. We straight away say, oh, there's a psychological problem there, which possibly is true, but we're just judging people, and that's not what we're saying here. We're trying to say that if it's your desire to be a better athlete and being a leaner athlete is going to help you achieve that, then that's what we're here to help you with, and to help you and guide you to understand what foods will help you, be at the race weight or training weight or living weight that you want to be, as compared to just going to decide what you want to eat yourself. So some guidance is what we're trying to get across, I think.
Yeah, and to be honest, it wasn't, we got Dr. Harry on to help with the guidance because he's the expert, but, we were experimenting with ourselves, and you were experimenting with Dr. Harry just for your own well-being, and you openly admitted on the podcast that you'd put on 5 or 6 kilos that you didn't want to, and you wanted to know how to get it off. So, firstly, you were just starting with yourself. You're not telling anyone else that they have to do it or need to do it. But the big lesson around this nutrition was he really put the accountability on you and said, yeah, we are a gluttonous society. We're addicted to food, and we have to stop that process. We have to break that pattern. And for me, one of the most powerful things he said on the podcast was, how long can you go hungry for? Because for most of us, once we're hungry, within 10 minutes we're eating. And that might not be a problem, but it's a problem when we're overeating. So, that question really stuck with me. It's because so often you get hungry and you go straight to the cupboard to satisfy that hunger. And so I started challenging myself and saying, okay, if I'm hungry, how long can I go before I eat? Can I go 2 hours? It's so uncomfortable. Can I go 3 hours, And you find that you really can. And you can be more accountable for your time of when you eat and what you eat, and you don't just have to do it mindlessly and be kind of robotic about it and do it unconsciously.
But it is difficult, Jordan. Actually, we were talking about it at coffee after the ride this morning, funnily enough. And as a society, we were taught to have 3 good meals a day. And I saw a documentary last night on intermittent fasting and how valuable it was in not ending up with Western diseases. And, it was fascinating to hear another, we were always seeing things on documentaries, but, it was certainly an eye-opener. But, there's so much that we can learn from understanding how to go about things, and getting experts to help us along that journey has been fascinating.
Yeah, I guess we'll wrap up the number one point, and we didn't want to start off with a controversial bang. We just wanted to really highlight the fact that it was a big learning for us this year, about what you can do with your mind around food and breaking habits that create that gluttony, I guess. So point number 2 is, and I think this is going to be in line with a lot of the themes of these lessons, is this year was less about the training side, and a lot of the biggest lessons were around the other factors of life. And I think that's because of the pandemic. A lot of people had to stop and reassess a lot of their life. And number 2 was what we learned this year about strength and conditioning, and we'll call it body alignment because we did a lot of work this year on what's called traditional strength and conditioning, but we had a different coach who has a bit of a different approach to it, and we're really excited for a lot of the TriVelo's athletes who are going to get access to that next year in 2021. But that was a big eye-opener for both of us to learn something different and really pay attention to that this year.
Yeah, the 1%ers, I think, is the theme of what we're talking about, because we spoke so much this year about the training, the actual day-to-day training sessions, and if you're a runner, the running sessions. But what did you do when you didn't have your runners on? And as a cyclist, what did you do when you weren't on your bike? And that's just often been left behind. And today, that's kind of I think that's the theme of this, is really, what are you doing to facilitate the improvement outside? It's almost like the businessman who just works in his business 16, 18 hours a day and never works on his business. He's just in there working flat out, just, and I've had so many examples in my own career where as soon as I've stepped back, things have opened up and I can see a bigger picture. It's the same with this. Doing the things that are going to contribute to your improvement, such as strength and conditioning or the body alignment. And we have certainly been taught some lessons about how to do exercises that are going to enable you to hold form better as a swimmer, as a runner, as a rider. And I think that's probably it in a nutshell.
The word we would use that we learned is restore. Doing exercises outside of training that restore your body and allow you to keep training. And the expert that we have on this, that we're going to get on the podcast next year, really talks about what you just said. You're working your body so much, training. You're even working your body poorly when you're working at your office because you're sitting in a poor position. And you need to undo that somewhere. If you're not, your body's just going to get worse and worse. And so you need to actually be spending the time undoing that and balancing that out. And that was a really big key learning for us this year.
Yeah, and there's so many examples of athletes who've had on podcasts. Actually, the most recent one with Natalie, where she had a major surgery on her hip, and she hasn't been injured since, because during that period where she was recovering, her main focus was on never letting this happen to her again. And she was saying to extreme lengths how much time she spent rehabbing continuously from that point on. It's not something she just did for that injury. It's something that she continues to do. And I think this is what we're trying to get across here. I have so many athletes who get an injury and then they rehab it and then never do the rehab work again. And I'm saying to them, you need to do that for life now so that this doesn't reoccur. Because it occurred for a reason in the beginning. Poor body alignment, the muscles aren't working in sync with each other, and you need to keep that going. You need to keep the flexibility, the suppleness, the strength, so that you can hold the form in the position you want to compete well.
Absolutely. Number 3, another 1%er, something that you discovered this year is just how important sleep is.
Yes, so much so that I now have an Oura ring, which some people might say is a little bit over the top, but it's just reaffirmed in my mind that I already knew I wasn't getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
And it's now telling me each day that, last night I had 5 hours 20. Admittedly, it was a training session that I had to get up at 3:55 for, but the fact is I went to bed too late. And I was watching that documentary we're talking about, and I ended up with 5 hours 20 sleep. And that's just not a good way to function each day. And you need to have more than that, especially when you're training and working. And it's forever making me accountable. And anything that's going to do that is a good thing. So sleep is a priority. It has got lots of recovery in it that enables us to re-establish ourselves and reset for the next day. And, it's an unusual phenomenon. The whole world goes to sleep. It's something we all do. And everybody accepts that. But we all push the barrow to, as a teenager, you're not happy unless you've got 10 hours. You're just sleeping a lot. You do need it. The hormones and the growth that's happening, you need more sleep. And a lot of adults find that hard to see. Teenagers, you're always in bed, you're always sleeping. But, that's what happens in that period. And then as you get older, it seems like you need less sleep, but that's actually not true. We do need, good quality sleep where we're in deep sleep periods and recovery periods in sleeping. So if one thing that you want to reset, for the next year is to concentrate on going to bed at earlier than normal. The wake-up time is going to be the same because of what your schedule is. And if your schedule is, it means that you start early in the morning, then do what I'm not doing and go to bed earlier. And and it is a habit that I've formed for so long, and it's a hard one to break. But that's my goal, is to, because of this accountable piece of machinery that I'm carrying around with me, is reminding me daily when I open up the app, going, oh, I only got 65% out of 100 for my last night's sleep. So it's telling me, it's data that I know was happening, but it makes me now do something about it.
Definitely. To me, it was, I had a lot of big learnings this year. This was also one of them. Taking a positive from COVID. For me, the COVID period completely reset my body clock. I started, because life stopped, didn't have anything on, didn't have late night sport training, late night social activities. My whole world stopped socially. So I suddenly started going to bed earlier, and it completely changed my year. My body clock reset. I would never go to bed before 10:30, 11 previously, and I started going to bed by 8:30, 9, going to sleep by 9, 9:30, winding down by 7 o'clock. And it got to the point where I stopped looking at my phone once it hit 8 o'clock. And the change was incredible. You just felt so good throughout the day. You woke up
ready.
Yeah. And
not tired.
I've already noticed since we've opened back up how poorly it's gone back straight away to you just start staying up a little bit later, and the mornings get a bit harder. And for that period, that was such a big learning. So you need to keep taking that.
Isn't it ironic that when you had nothing to go to and no activities that were going to keep you busy, you went to bed earlier? But when you've got all these activities that are going to keep you busy, you go to bed later. It's just quite bizarre.
What do you mean? I mean, that seems obvious to me.
No, but you know you got a busy day tomorrow.
Yeah,
so
you should go to bed earlier.
Go to bed earlier. And what we do is we go back to our old habits.
Yeah.
I've got a huge day tomorrow. I think I'll go to bed at 11.
It just feels like you're trying to fit in more, and so you end up just still chatting to people or hanging out with people till 10 o'clock, which you miss through the COVID period. You miss that social side, but you also learn that it's incredibly valuable to get that sleep, and it really changed things for my day, which is very in line with number 4, and that is the importance of sleep for recovery, but the importance of recovery, and you've just put even more emphasis on that this year. Yeah,
one thing that I think I've learned, especially when we had to train in a bubble, was 5K or inside. So during winter, no one really cared about the 5K bubble in Victoria, because it was too cold and wet anyway. So we just moved everything inside. And that is very fatiguing when there's, when you compare a 2-hour trainer session indoors compared to a 2-hour ride outdoors, the amount of freewheeling you do outdoors compared to indoors, it's quite remarkable. So 2 hours indoor, I reckon, equated to a 3-hour outdoor. So I found that we needed more recovery. We could only train in blocks that were shorter, that had more recovery straight away. So we changed our whole, periodization because of the amount of time we were spending on the trainer.
You used to experiment more with 3 weeks on, 1 week off, sometimes 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and now you won't pretty much let anyone go more than 2 weeks on.
No, not if they're spending all the time on the trainer. It's too fatiguing.
Yep.
And it really worked a treat.
Yep.
So recovery was I've always been a believer in recovery, but just not just physically recovering, but mentally recovering too, by doing things that are going to relax you. And normally you would do things socially that would relax you, but during the recovery, during the COVID period, we would spend more time. I guarantee the majority of households would start to get into series documentaries or read more, and they're really good things to wind down and have an interest outside of your family or your work or your passion. And that would be a conversation point with people. I'm reading this book. Have you read that? Or I'm watching this, series. It's caught our attention. It's been fun to watch. So, so the recovery mentally and physically.
Yeah. Point number 5, walking is undervalued.
Something that I vowed as an athlete I would never do. I just despise walking and always have. And what a waste of time. It's slow getting from A to B, and I can run nearly as fast as a car most of the time. If I was going, around up to the shops, etc., by the time you found a car park, I'd already be there. So coming from a running background, walking is not something that I really embraced. But I found that this year, it started off really because I saw Sky cycling team was part of their regime for training was they had to walk. That was a session every day. They had to walk, and I just thought, well, what's this walking about? So kind of investigated a little bit about that, and started doing it myself. And I was, my big walks were 5 minutes at the start, 10 minutes, and progressed to 15 minutes.
Which is, I think, if I remember correctly, it was a bit of a shock to you when you started walking. You went, wow, my body actually is quite incapable of walking, which, is almost a little bit shameful to realise when you're such a professional athlete.
Yep.
To go, wow, I actually can't, my body can't actually, my legs can't handle walking 15 minutes.
Yep. And the first 2 or 3 minutes, because I've been sitting at a desk all day or training in a bent position on a bike, I hadn't stood up straight for years. So walking really loosened my whole body up, took away some aches and pains. As an aerobic activity, I was still burning calories by walking, not a great deal. But it was also really good for clarity of mind. I had so much thinking during that walking period. If I was getting stuck at the desk with whatever project I was working on, by the time I came back from the walk, I had a really good plan and I worked so effectively for the next 2 or 3 hours. So making sure that was part of my routine each day, and taking the dog for a walk was also an added bonus. The dog got out as well, and I really enjoyed taking the dog. As part of that routine, I felt like if I didn't go with the dog, I was cheating the dog a little bit. So, so there were so many good things about it. And, you can do a walk around a 200-metre block if you wanted to. The worst extreme case is in a jail cell walking 4 steps up and down, but there's evidence to prove that can maintain fitness, even in a minute space. So don't complain about doing a block that's, not very big. You don't have to go for 2-hour walks. If you can progress and you've got time to go longer, then I advise that. There's just so much benefit, so many positive things about walking.
And that point you made about getting clarity, I think you would even say to me a couple of times, and that this is pretty BS, you'd say, I don't have time. I didn't have time to go for a walk today. And that's just totally untrue, because you'll be more effective with breaks. And that is just proven beyond reasonable doubt that take a 15-minute break, you'll be sharper and much more effective and much more productive at your desk. But we can fall into the trap of thinking, I've got so much to do, I just can't leave my desk. But I think eventually you hit the point where you knew it was better for you no matter what.
Yeah, the productivity thing was really, I think, the driving force for me, because it was just too obvious to me. And look, I used to go for a ride to break it up, but, to go for a decent ride, I would always think, it has to be at least an hour.
Yeah.
Half an hour maybe. Yeah. It's just... and the time it took you to get
ready,
organised and what does it take to walk? Put your shoes on, open the door and walk. If it's raining, you put an umbrella up. There's just no reason why you can't do it.
Absolutely. So number 6, the 6th lesson of the year. Last year, one of our lessons was you need to focus on your weaknesses. People, don't focus enough on their weaknesses because they're tough. And this year you're saying make sure you're still playing to your strengths.
Yeah, sometimes people can go to the extreme and only concentrate on things that they're really poor at. But if you don't bring along your actual strengths at the same time, that will actually diminish in its value. So, I'm a big believer in everybody training with a balance. Sure, your mind and focus is on things that you need to improve on, your hill climbing, or as a runner, you're sprinting at the finish, or as a cyclist, you're finishing sprint, positioning, all those things that you're probably not a strength of yours, obviously work on those things. But the things that you're good at, particularly the races you choose races that are going to show off your strengths. don't choose races that are going to show up your weaknesses. And you'll have a much more enjoyable experience. And there's obviously outliers. Sean Wilkerson would be an example of a big, strong, heavy guy who needed to lose weight doing ball. That's an example we used this year.
Yeah, that was a podcast we did this year, and if you want to listen to it, the title was called "How a 100-kilo cyclist became the ultimate hill climber," and that's the moral of the story.
Yeah, and that is someone who really worked on their weakness, and it became a strength. So much so that I used to be quite scared when I was going to go riding for him, how much he'd hurt me.
Yeah.
Where for 8 months out of 12, I was playing with him on every hill, but all of a sudden the tide turned, and so it is possible to make a weakness a strength. Definitely, there's so many examples of that. Sure, concentrate on your weaknesses, but don't forget about bringing your strengths along, because that's the thing that's got you to be a good athlete in the first place.
And something you mentioned just there, which is point 7, and it feels like we've mentioned it 100 times on the podcast this year, so it has to be a lesson to remind everyone, is that pick goals that suit you.
Yeah, and I'm forever seeing people at a coffee shop or at the pub or just being overwhelmed by their mates saying, I'm doing this, and then all of a sudden a groundswell happens. Yeah, I'm doing that too. Oh, and you're the only one not doing it. So, okay, I'll do it. And then you happen to be picking Three Peaks, which is a 12-hour event, and you weigh 100 kilo. And that's going to be the worst day of your life. So that's just one example of picking something that's got massive consequences to make it not enjoyable. And I'm a big believer in, picking stuff that suits you. So at the end of the day, sure, be a part of that coffee shop, but have a say in, listen, guys, is that really what we want to do? Bring some common sense to the discussion, and not just pick the extremist thing that you can possibly think of. Is that what we're trying to prove here? Mm-hmm. What's the goal of what we're trying to prove? That would be, bringing some relevance to the conversation is really important if you're being swayed by a group of people. And if you want to be a sheep, that's okay. But if not, pick your own individual goal.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Lesson number 8, and I quote you on this one. You said this will be on the list every year forever, and that is consistency is still the king.
Yep. And people are probably they can be caught. My middle name is you're going to ram on about consistency again. Well, unfortunately, if you don't have that, you are not going to succeed. Just this user worker who gets a really good high-paying job and it goes for 3 weeks, and you've got another worker who just gets a steady income week in, week out, and he has 52 of those weeks. And the other guy's a contractor and he has a great job that earns him 3 times as much as the guy who gets the income. And then he has 4 weeks where he has nothing. Then he goes again, he gets another contract. At the end of the year, the guy who's done 52 weeks might have earned $52,000, $1,000 a week. This other guy's had 4 contracts that add up to $32,000, but they were big paying contracts. But in between, he had nothing. So the consistent worker is actually better off. The guy who does consistent training day in, day out, even if they're not high intense balls to the wall sessions, compared to the guy who smashes out 4 or 5 days and then has 6 days off, at the end of the year, the guy who's just ticked along will be in a better position.
Perfect way to put it. Lesson number 9, and we said it's been spoken about way too much this year. Everyone is sick of talking about it, but what we learned from COVID, because we learned some pretty valuable lessons with regards to training.
Yeah, where do you begin with COVID? I just think we undervalued the indoor aspect of training. I did, probably. Most people didn't want to do it because it sucked.
Boring.
It's boring. It's not why I ride a bike, or not why I run, or not why I want to stay fit and healthy. But when you've got no other choice, you have to actually adapt. And I had a saying at the start of COVID, adapt or get left behind. And I knew zero about Zwift. I'd done a lot of training indoors, but I'd done it staring at the wall, listening to music.
Because you preferred that over Zwift. You said, I don't need a game.
I don't need a game. Yeah. But once I got into it, I saw the value that we could pick the eyes out of a Zwift game and use it to our advantage, and not do it every session, but use it for the value that we were as a tool. And we could implement our own training programs into the Zwift program, and then we could do races, handicap races. So it was the controlled environment. So COVID created this science experiment indoors. I had no one sick. I had no one crash their bike. There was plenty of people on Zwift running through each other. And that was one of the things we had to say on our first bunch ride a couple of weeks back. I had to stop everybody and say, listen, we have been used to running through each other, but today we have to go round each other, okay? Let's not crash. Yeah. So as a science experiment, it was controlled. We were really writing exactly how a program should be written. And the improvement in everybody's fitness who did the program was astonishing. I've never seen results like it. I've never had in 1 week 45 new FTPs in one session. It was so gratifying to see people improve. And as I said before, COVID was pretty shit, but look at the positive side that we got. For every negative, there's a positive. So we learnt that indoor training isn't such a bad thing. And next year when we have a winter, and if it's a normal year with no COVID, we won't hesitate if it's raining on a Saturday morning for a bunch ride to jump on our Zwift Saturday morning endurance session and get the same workout. Same value, if not more.
Mm-hmm. It's a perfect way to summarise it. Controlled training is awesome. I think that's how you said it.
Yep.
And you spoke about adaptability into there, and that is lesson number 10. The ability to be adaptable, and not just to the pandemic. It applies to every level. Be adaptable within the session, within a race, within a week. So things can stuff up within the week, within the month, or within a pandemic.
Yeah, and the pandemic highlighted it more so. I think that's why it's in our 12, because we haven't had to be tested with adaptability very much over our journey. We have a set routine of our life, and this year that was turned upside down. And so when it came to a race in previous years, if things went wrong, a lot of us would fall to pieces and lose the plot. And as we talk about limiting your losses, instead of just making the best out of a bad situation, people would just drop out or give up. And I found this year we had a lot less of that, people cracking it with things not going well for them. In past years, people would lose the plot and not be adaptable and not try and make the best of a bad situation. And I think one thing COVID has done is made us more adaptable, because you think about every single thing we've had to do, in families, look after our grandparents. We've had to think of ways so that they are not going to get sick, so they don't go to the shops. We've found ways to get food to them, to Zoom video with them so they feel not lonely. There's so many things that have happened that we've created a better life through this negative experience. And same with training. We've really adapted to 100 things that have gone against us, yet we've come out of it better athletes, with worse conditions than we've ever experienced. We couldn't even go for an endurance ride more than an hour outside. What do? We ride 3 hours indoor and then do 1 hour outdoor, and we still get 4 hours. If that's not an example of adaptability, I don't know what is. Say you're only allowed to run for an hour and you're a triathlete. Well, you ride 5 hours indoor and then go and run 1 hour, and then, at the next morning you do another hour, and then the next day you do another hour. So you end up at the end of the week with the same amount of hours that you're going to do, except it just has to be broken up a bit.
Yep. Lesson number 11, the value of aerobic fitness and how vital it is to every program.
Yeah, and I think I keep referring to COVID teaching me lessons. I think I knew that lesson, but I didn't know how many of the athletes that we coached weren't getting that point. And at first, when I said to athletes that we were going to ride the ergo for 3 hours, they almost were sending me to the asylum because they thought that was just crazy. And those same athletes ended up doing 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, and some did 6. I've done 4 6-hour rides through this COVID period on an ergo. I didn't think I would ever do that.
Mm.
But you can do that, and you need to do that. The aerobic fitness is one of the reasons why our athletes have improved with so many PBs. I know it's a controlled environment indoors, but most of them were doing those 2 hard sessions indoors anyway during a normal period on a trainer. So what's changed? Well, the aerobic fitness of the indoor training, where there's pressure on the pedals for 2 and 3 hours at a time, no traffic light, no coffee, just continuous riding with pressure on the pedals, where you might not be at your limit, but you are not dropping your heart rate down. You're holding your heart rate at a period where you're just building this engine. And those Saturday morning endurance rides, they had hard bits in them, but the majority of the ride was at 75% with hard bits in it. So 2 to 3 hours of 75% pressure on the pedals, no stopping, and then throw in 110% for a minute here and there. Boy, what a difference our aerobic fitness gained from that COVID experience.
And from a triathlete perspective, we had a lot of triathletes this year smashing their running PBs without any interval training, especially through the COVID period. A lot were just on maintenance programs or base programs, not doing high-intensity interval sessions, doing base training, aerobic training, yet still improving their 5 or 10 kilometre time trials, which is an experiment in itself, which proves exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and people think aerobic fitness is long runs. Well, aerobic fitness is easy runs, and it can be long, but it's not with intensity. Anaerobic fitness is with intensity. Aerobic fitness is a pace that's sustainable for a long time, but you can do and get gains in aerobic fitness for 30 minutes.
Our final lesson for the year is discipline. And we just learn a lot of lessons about discipline, and it kind of ties in with our very first point about food, but it ties in for a lot of things we've learned this year. Discipline with your walking and your 1%ers and your food. And we spoke about it a lot throughout the year, especially when we did the podcast on what I said is one of the best books I've ever read, and definitely a life-changing book. Was David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. And it was, if you didn't listen to the podcast, it was just an extreme example of how mentally tough we can be, how much more mentally tough we can be than we realise when we're put in situations where we have to be, and how much more we can discipline our mindsets. And that was quite a big learning for a range of reasons this year.
Yeah, some of the stories you've told me from that book, which I should get to read, the examples he gave, the particular one you were talking about off air was when they were in the freezing cold water. Talk about that and talk about how that relates to what we're talking about.
I don't know if you need to read the book, so I reckon I've reiterated every story to you. But we were talking about the fact that our minds are conditioned to seek comfort, and we're always looking to go for the comfortable option. And his whole goal with life is to find the uncomfortable option, which is so hard to do. And when he was in his Navy SEALs training, they put them through some gruesome stuff. But one of the examples was they would put them in the freezing cold water and make them do sit-ups for hours on end because they wanted people to pull out, and they would just make them sit there until they were hypothermic and shaking. They just wanted them to be as cold as possible so they'd pull out, and the guys around him would be suffering and they couldn't cope with it and they would pull out. Or some guys were really mentally strong and they'd have strategies to get through it and strategies to pretend it wasn't cold. And he was so crazy that he wasn't looking for strategies to make it easier. He wanted to make it harder, and he would sit there saying, I wish it got colder. I don't want it to get warmer. I want it to get colder. And that's just him seeking that discomfort. And to me, that is just so telling for, what we're capable of in so many things. And I apply it to my own life. Even, as soon as you wake up, you're seeking comfort. And we spoke about how when your alarm goes off, the first thing you want to do is turn it off. And it's so hard to just not turn it off and just get up. And it's just an example of straight away in the day, like are you choosing the comfortable option, or are you trying to discipline your mind to become stronger and choose the uncomfortable option? And that's why I spoke about with the food thing, how long can I be hungry for? Could I last 6 hours if I had to? And it's just a game that I find really valuable. And
people would ask, well, why would you want to do that to yourself?
Yeah.
Why are you making your life so difficult? What do you say to that?
Well, this is probably the biggest learning, and why I think it's so valuable is because when you can do that, it gives you belief that you can do anything that you're trying to do. It conditions you to have belief in yourself about what you can do. When you're taking the weak option always, when things get tough, you don't actually believe in yourself. So
that's a great answer.
Yeah. As athletes, we're really good at suffering. You know, we're really good at putting ourselves through a tough training session. We're really good in that aspect, and we can do it a lot. But we don't do it in all areas of our life. And that's what I found this year, is that I could challenge myself more in other areas. And I think in summary, the answer is, if you're willing to put yourself through that, you're making yourself stronger. And he calls it, you're callousing your mind, and your mind's a muscle, and you want to make it stronger. And the stronger it is, the more you can handle. And when hard times come along, you know you can handle it. So.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that sums up a lot of what we've learnt this year is the adaptability and the consistency and the mindset. If you allow yourself to take the easy option once, there's more likely that you'll continue to do it. And we do that as humans. Once we've had an experience, we'll replicate it because that was the easy way out of it, and not necessarily the most beneficial outcome that we want to achieve. But there's decisions you make all the time, and it's based around this point of discipline. You don't want to live your life, like being a hard ass the whole time, but you can do both.
Mm-hmm.
There's times when you need to make tough decisions that are going to be more beneficial for everybody around you, including yourself, rather than taking the soft option. You can think of so many examples where you don't want to get involved in something because it's the easy option. Whereas if you think there's something not right, you can choose to turn your back on it, or go and help. And I think this year has taught us, through the fires and through the pandemic, that we are definitely a human race who do genuinely want to help each other. And if I can finish on that idea of being grateful for what you've got, and also being gracious and thankful that you're in a position where you can have structure and progression in your life, and being fairly privileged to be in this position, to be able to compete and push yourself and test yourself. When I've got thousands of examples that has happened this year of people who are very close, who are struggling to breathe and to walk, who were very fit and healthy people. And I'm sure there's people out there who've had people pass away. So it is perspective, and I think that as at Christmas is something you really need to think about at the end of the day. And that's kind of where I'd like to leave this discussion with, even though it's a bit emotional way to do it. But I think it's so important that we understand where we're at in our life, and what things we can do to help others. And at the end of the day, the more you can help others, it's incredible how that makes you feel good about yourself. And you don't do it for that reason, but you feel good about the way you're living your life. And I think that's the most important thing about these topics that we're talking about. There's so many really detailed things in there, but at the end of the day, they mean nothing unless you're willing to be that sort of person that you quite go to sleep with and say, well, I did the best I could today, and tomorrow I'm going to have another crack.
Really powerful way to finish. Well, that is it for this year from TriVelo's Coaching. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for listening all year. If you've tuned in, we really appreciate it, and we hope we've helped you in some way. That's, like you said, is the goal of this podcast. I do get a lot of enjoyment when people email us or message us or just tell us on a ride that they love the podcast. And we hope we can keep bringing it to you in 2021. That's it for this year. Merry Christmas from us. Happy New Year. Enjoy the holiday period. We'll have a couple of weeks break, and we'll be back in the first week of January with a new podcast and ready for 2021.
Look forward to it.
Thanks very much for listening. We'll see you next time.